Robert Caulfield, the architect of this fantastic development. You must have had a lot of consideration about the needs of the clients who live here.
It was a very difficult project. We have done a lot of disability work, but this one was very interesting because it's an apartment building, and the brief was that the building had to look as good as any other apartment in the area, nothing for it to stand out other than it being a good quality development, yet it has to be fitted out with all of the requirements that people with any level of disability needed. So there were a lot of research went into every aspect of the components that have gone into this building.
One of the things that I think people are going to react to when they come into this building is just how lovely it looks in a visual sense. You've really worked on providing an atmosphere, almost like a luxury hotel, some might say, or a high quality hotel that is just beautifully designed, the colour schemes, everything. How much work went into that?
Well, this was part of the brief by Purposed Housing, who is an excellent client for this, and part of the brief was that the building had to be the highest quality apartment that the people living here could be proud of. So right from the beginning, we were looking at a building that did have good quality finishes throughout, that looked like any other good quality apartment building, but it had all of the facilities that were needed for the people living here without them being obvious.
And the finishes in the kitchens, the bathrooms, etc. I suppose in your designing, you had to think a lot about the type of issues that the residents face. The putting up of blinds or opening doors and things, that all had to be worked in the design?
Absolutely. The kitchens, for example, are accessible to anyone who can stand or with a wheelchair. They can also be electrically fitted so that the benches can go up and down to suit people's various height requirements. And things like doors, windows, blinds have all been wired up so that they can be automatically opened if that's the requirement. And of course the building itself, every aspect of the building is accessible, easily accessible for someone in a wheelchair or who needs assistance with walking.
In the designing, it's quite clear that you seem to have concentrated quite a bit on getting the inside outside.
Yes, one of the criteria that we wanted to have was that the people who were living in these apartments would have good, generous outdoor spaces. Obviously on the ground floor they've got courtyards, the upper floor they've got fairly generous balconies, so they could have a good quality of life both in the apartment, inside the apartment and on their balconies, just like anybody would in any apartment. But the areas here are pretty generous, and that was to provide good, comfortable areas for them, and also to make sure that they were accessible to wheelchairs or anyone that needed physical support in moving around the apartment.
Apart from the finish that you've put together, you've actually designed the apartments so that the residents can put their own mark on it by the way in which they set it up, the way they add their flower pots and things.
It's designed as an apartment that's flexible, and we certainly encourage the residents to provide their own finishes, wallpapers, paint colours and things like that. If that's what they wanted, we provided all the basics, and the residents could then fit out special things that they may need to suit their own physical limitations, or just things that they wanted to have, colours and material finishes and things like that. These are their homes. These are their homes, and we wanted these homes for them to be as comfortable a home as possible that made them as happy as possible.
And Robert, the last comment or question to you is the fact that, do you see this style of apartment and building now becoming one of the forerunners, the style of the future for this type of housing?
Well, I think that what this shows is, with sensible planning, that any apartment can basically have a good level of accessibility for people who need it. And just by demonstrating that this apartment looks just like a good quality apartment that you might see anywhere, yet it's got all of the facilities that people need. There's no reason why many of these things can't be fitted into everyday apartments, and people with disabilities encouraged to live in any other block. But this one, of course, is being fitted out to much higher levels where people might have quite significant needs. So the wiring and mechanical systems have been put in place to enable all sorts of things to be fitted easily for people needing them.
Do you see this style of building being the main type of approach that will be taken in the future for disabled people in housing?
Well, what we like to see is that people with disabilities lead a life just like anybody else does. So a building like this certainly enables them to do that, but I think it also demonstrates that any apartment building can actually have these sorts of things fitted within it, and the people with a disability can live in those as well. So it does set a standard of what can be provided for these people, but it also shows that they can actually fit into normal mainstream life pretty comfortably.
Robert Caulfield, thank you very much for a great building design, which I'm sure will be enjoyed by many people over many years.
That's my pleasure, but more importantly, the pleasure of all the staff in my office and, of course, the client.